Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog. This Hindsight Is 2020 tag I learned about from Melissa Firman, a longtime blogging buddy and virtual friend of mine. You can take a look at her channel in the link below. But when I saw Melissa do this, I really wanted to join in because it's all about early reading and which books inspired me to become a lifelong reader, and that's something I'm passionate about. So it's a list of questions like many of the tags, and the first one is, what were you like as an early and learning reader? Well, I loved reading right from the beginning. My mom taught me how to read before I went to kindergarten. Thanks, Mom. I started with Go Dog Go. It was the first book that I ever read. And from there, I moved on to the other P.D. Eastman books, Little Golden books, of course, Dr. Seuss. Sneetches is my all-time favorite. And if you have never read What Was I Afraid Of About the Empty Green Pants, which is also in the Sneetches collection, you must. One of my favorite stories. So I was reading from an early age. If I didn't have a book, which was rare, I'd read whatever was available, the back of a cereal box, road signs, probably driving my parents crazy. I also drove my mom crazy because when I was reading, I completely escaped into a fictional world. And, I'd be reading a Nancy Drew book. My mom would be calling my name over and over. I had no idea. I didn't even hear her. So I'm sure that was very frustrating. Question 2 is, what book or book series really got you into reading as a kid? There are so many. I have just loved reading right from the beginning. In first grade, my best friend and I, hi Barb, every time our class would go to the library, we loved the Ant and Bee books. So this kind of dates me. These were published in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. They were little books about that big, and they were about a couple of friends, an ant and a bee, and about their adventures. I don't know why, and I haven't seen these books in years, but we were obsessed with them. And, every library visit, we just ran over to that section and got another Ant and Bee book out. I think what turned me onto chapter books was my second grade teacher, who was amazing. She read aloud to the class at the end of each day while we were waiting for the buses to be called. So thank you, Mrs. Holshoe. And one of the books that she read aloud to us was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, which just started me off. She finished reading that book to our class, and I was so taken with it and so fascinated by it that on our next trip to the school library, I went over to the C.S. Lewis section. They had the whole series, and I went through them one by one, read every book in the series. So I think that really kicked me off. And then in third grade, another turning point, our class read A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. This was probably my first book obsession. I loved this book. And I read the rest of the series. Here are a couple of them. Yes, I still have them. These are my originals. Loved it. Read the whole series, reread them, and then I got to play Meg, the lead role, in our class production of A Wrinkle in Time, which was one of the highlights of my short acting career. Those books also set me off on a lifelong fascination of time travel, any fiction about time travel or manipulation of time. I just love that stuff. I'm so fascinated by it. And A Wrinkle in Time was the beginning of that. From there, like most kids, I loved the Bobbsey twins, which of course led me to Nancy Drew. Loved those, had a huge collection of them, read all of them. Never read the Hardy Boys when I was a kid. My best friend and I also were totally into Trixie Belden. This is an old one without its cover anymore. But my neighborhood friend and I wanted to be Trixie and her pal Honey. In fact, we pretended to be them sometimes. The only problem was we could never find a mystery to solve in our quiet suburban neighborhood. So we had to content ourselves with reading about mysteries. Another mystery series I loved was Encyclopedia Brown. Had a bunch of these, got them out of the library. Always looked for them in used bookstores. I read some of my mom's old books and my aunt's when I was young, including The Five Little Peppers and How They Grew, which I absolutely loved. There were a bunch of others. This was kind of the format for kids' books back then. And then I got into some of the childhood classics. I loved The Secret Garden. Paddington, of course. I still have this one, but I read the whole series. I loved Pippi Longstocking. Totally fascinated by her. I think most kids my age did. I liked the Beverly Cleary books. Ellen Tebbett's was one of my favorites. And again, this is still my original copy. And of course, the Little House books. Once I got started on those, I read the whole series as well. And that kind of led me, I think, to more realistic fiction versus fantasy and science fiction. And one of there weren't a lot of middle grade novels around back then, but one that really caught me was called Katie John by Mary Calhoun. I have never heard of this book since. I've never seen anyone else talk about it, but I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with the main character. I wanted to be her. I'm sure you're seeing a trend here. In this case, I loved this book so much, I wanted to name one of my children Katie. Alas, we had two sons, and our best friends named their first child Katie, so that was out. But this did bring me, I think I reread it multiple times when I was a kid. In middle school and high school, I graduated from the picture books and the kids section, which again, there wasn't a lot. There wasn't as much back then as there is now. And I started reading every single Agatha Christie book in the library and every Ray Bradbury book. And I was especially into Ray Bradbury. But both of these authors, I read everything our local library had from them. Interestingly, just in the last couple of years, I've gotten back into both of them, and I am rereading and kind of rediscovering these favorite authors from my childhood. And of course, I loved English class. I loved reading the books. I loved discussing the books. This explains why I like book groups so much now. I had no problem reading the classics. Really loved Jane Eyre, loved Dickens. We read A Tale of Two Cities and a couple of other Dickens novels in school. And, again, I credit wonderful teachers who, made these books come to life and led amazing discussions in class. So question number 3 is, has there been a person in your life, real or fictional, who inspired you to be a reader? Well, besides these amazing teachers I've mentioned already, that would be my biggest inspirations and influences are absolutely my mother and my father. They both loved to read and always had a book going, as did I. And, I was a teen in the late 70s, early 80s when Stephen King was just beginning to get popular. And all three of us loved his novels. And every time a new Stephen King novel came out, this is one from that era, we would pass it through the family. Each one of us would read it, tell the others how amazing it was and pass it on to the next person. So, and really, that time with my mom and dad reading as a kid, it really inspired a lifelong connection between reading and books with them. My mom and I still love to talk books together and to pick out books for each other. Every year we attend Booktopia, a weekend-long book event held in Vermont. We really missed it last year and this year, so hopefully 2022 we'll be back. With my dad, it's one of the things I really miss most about my dad. We loved to talk books together, and I loved picking out books for him as gifts. When I gave him a book as a gift, particularly a new author that I had found for him to try, and he loved it so much that he couldn't wait to talk to me and my husband about it. And we'd get together, and I've got great memories of sitting out on his porch and just, him describing in these excited terms how great this recent book was. That's kind of come full circle, my connection with my dad, because when he died a few years ago, my husband and I inherited much of his collection of Stephen King and Dean Koontz books. And here's one. We've got a whole bookcase full of books that were his. This means so much to both of us, and we're gradually making our way through them. My husband just read this last summer for Big Book Summer, and I'm planning to read it this year. And sometimes we come across spots where my dad noted the date that he finished a book, and that just makes my heart swell. It's still a connection with him that I really cherish. So question 4 is, at what point did you begin to identify as a reader? I think I've already covered that immediately. I loved books from the first day my parents began reading them to me, and I loved to read and considered myself a reader as soon as I tackled Go Dog Go and, started moving on to some others. Question 5, how has being a reader shaped your life and your worldview? Oh, I think it is so important, especially in this global world we live in now, to read a wide variety of books, both fiction and nonfiction, about different places, different cultures, different people. I think reading widely like this has really broadened my own worldview. It has not only made me better informed, but I think reading broadly like that also has made me more empathetic and compassionate, able to better understand the challenges that other people who are different than I am have faced and are facing. So I think books are so important in our world today, and that reading broadly has made me who I am. And finally, the last question is to tag someone else whose early reading history you'd like to hear about. I'd like to hear about everybody's early reading history, but my understanding is this is an older tag. Most booktubers have already done it. So if you haven't done it yet, or you're new to BookTube, consider yourself tagged. The questions are listed down below in the information section. And please leave a comment and tell me about your early reading habits and which books inspired you to become a lifelong reader.